There will be moments in your life when nothing seems to make sense. You'll pray and the answers don't come. You'll look at your situation and wonder, why is this happening to me? Why now? Why this way? And in those moments, your faith will be tested not by what you know, but by what you don't understand. It's easy to trust God when everything is clear, when the plan is laid out in front of you, and when life is moving in the direction you hoped. But real trust begins where your understanding ends. Faith is not about having all the answers. It's about choosing to believe that the one who holds the answers is good, loving, and faithful even when you can't see the outcome. Think about a child holding a parent's hand. The child doesn't need to understand every detail of the journey. They simply trust the heart of the one leading them. That's the kind of trust God invites you into. You may not know what he's doing, but you can always know why, because his heart is full of love for you. God's character never changes. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So when the path feels dark, when the doors seem closed, and when the pain is too heavy, remind yourself, I may not understand his ways, but I can trust his heart. His heart for you is good. His heart for you is kind. His heart for you is for your ultimate joy and eternal hope. So don't let confusion push you away from God. Let it pull you closer. Don't let questions harden your heart. Let them drive you to lean on his heart. Because when you cannot trace his hand, you can trust his heart. Trust begins where understanding ends, and that is one of the hardest yet most freeing truths in the journey of faith. We often like to feel in control, to have the answers neatly packaged, and to know the next steps before we take them. Our human nature craves certainty, clarity, and explanation. Clarity and explanation. We want to connect the dots, make sense of the pain, and understand the purpose behind every circumstance. But faith doesn't operate in the realm of full understanding. It operates in the space where understanding falls short. That space is where trust is born. When life brings confusion, our first instinct is to demand answers from God. We want him to explain himself, to give us the reasons, to show us the full picture before we agree to take the next step. But God is not obligated to explain everything to us. He is not a God who reveals all mysteries on our timetable. He is a God who invites us to walk with him, not because we see, but because we believe. The truth is, if we only trust him when we understand, then we are not really trusting him. We are trusting our own understanding. Trusting God requires stepping into the unknown, embracing the mystery, and choosing to rest in his character even when his plans don't make sense. Think about some of the greatest stories of faith. Abraham left his homeland, not knowing where God was taking him, simply because God said, go. Noah built an ark when there was no sign of rain. Joseph held on to God's promises even when he was betrayed, enslaved, and forgotten in prison. None of them had all the details. None of them understood why things were happening the way they were, yet they trusted, and their trust was honored. Their lives remind us that God doesn't need us to figure everything out before he can work. He simply asks us to believe that he knows what he's doing, even when we don't. The reality is, life is full of moments that defy our understanding. There are seasons of loss, sickness, setbacks, unanswered prayers, and doors that close without explanation. And in those moments, we face a choice. Do we allow our lack of understanding to create distance between us and God, or do we allow it to deepen our dependence on him? Trust doesn't mean the questions disappear. It means you choose to place your confidence in God's goodness despite the questions. Circumstances may cloud our view, pain may blur our vision, and trials may make us question his presence, but he has not changed. He is still light in the darkness, still faithful in the waiting, still merciful in the failures, still sovereign in the chaos. That is why you can trust him even when nothing else in life feels trustworthy. Our emotions, as real as they are, can sometimes deceive us. You may feel abandoned, but God says he will never leave you. You may feel unloved, but God declares his love is everlasting. You may feel defeated, but God promises you are more than a conqueror through him. When circumstances whisper lies, his character speaks truth. The unchanging nature of who he is becomes the anchor that keeps you from being tossed around by feelings and situations. It reminds you that what you are going through is temporary, but who God is will never change. One of the most powerful demonstrations of God's unchanging character is his faithfulness through generations. Stories of his people, from Abraham to Moses to David to the disciples, show that he is consistent. He made promises and he kept them. He guided his people through deserts, through battles, through exile, and through persecution, and he never once abandoned them. The same God who parted the Red Sea, who provided manna in the wilderness, who shut the mouths of lions, and who raised the dead, is the God who walks with you today. His character has not grown weak over time, his love has not diminished, and his power has not faded. He is unchanging, eternal, and trustworthy. Circumstances test us because they tempt us to interpret God's character through the lens of what we see. When life is easy, we declare, "Oh, God is good." But when life is painful, the temptation is to doubt his goodness. That is why we must separate who God is from what life feels like. Circumstances are temporary and shifting, but God's nature is eternal and unshakable. When you root your faith in his character rather than in your situation, you find stability no storm can destroy. Consider the way a mountain stands tall through centuries of wind and rain. Seasons change around it. Spring flowers bloom, autumn leaves fall, winter snow blankets the ground, but the mountain remains unmoved. In the same way, God's character stands firm through every season of your life. You may be in a season of joy or in a season of grief, but his love is the same. You may be walking through abundance or through scarcity, but his faithfulness is the same. You may be facing open doors or slammed doors, but his goodness is the same. He is not swayed by your situation, and that is why you can lean on him without fear. The beauty of this truth is that it allows you to rest. You don't have to constantly evaluate whether God is for you or against you based on your circumstances. You don't have to interpret his love through the lens of what you're experiencing. You can rest in the fact that his character is constant. That means you can pray with confidence, knowing he listens. You can walk through trials with courage, knowing he is with you. You can face uncertainty with peace, knowing he does not change with the times. You don't need all the answers to hold on to his heart, because faith was never designed to depend on perfect clarity. If life required you to have complete explanations before you could trust, then trust would never exist. The very essence of faith is believing in the goodness of God, even when your mind cannot make sense of what is happening around you. Answers may comfort your intellect, but trust anchors your soul. There will always be questions that remain unresolved, mysteries that are too deep for you to grasp, and situations that don't add up no matter how much you analyze them. Yet in the middle of all that, you can cling to the heart of God because his heart is steady even when life is not. Our natural desire is to want explanations. When something difficult happens, we immediately ask why. Why did this door close? Why did this relationship fail? Why didn't the healing come? Why did the plan change? Our minds crave understanding, and there's nothing wrong with wanting to know. But God does not promise to answer every why. What he does promise is that his heart toward you is filled with love, that he is working for your good, and that he will never leave you. The reality is that answers may ease your curiosity for a moment, but God's heart sustains you for a lifetime. There are times when answers simply wouldn't be enough. Even if God explained the reason behind every hardship, it wouldn't take away the pain or erase the struggle. What carries you through is not an intellectual explanation, but a relational assurance. The assurance that God's heart is kind, his heart is good, and his heart is for you. Holding on to his heart means choosing relationship over reason, intimacy over information, trust over total clarity. It means believing that his love is greater than your confusion. Think about how a child clings to a parent. The child doesn't understand the complexity of finances, schedules, or responsibilities, but they know the parent's love. They find comfort not in having all the answers, but in knowing they are held. In the same way, you don't need to know every detail of God's plan to feel secure in his care. His heart is enough. His presence is enough. His love is enough. His love is enough. Answers may change, situations may shift, but his heart remains constant, and that's what you can hold on to. The truth is, sometimes answers are delayed, and sometimes they never come this side of eternity. If your faith depends only on explanations, you will live in constant frustration. So, But if your faith is rooted in God's heart, you will find peace that surpasses understanding. You don't need every question resolved to walk with confidence. You only need to know that the one leading you is trustworthy. You can lean on his heart when your mind is weary, when your emotions are fragile, and when your strength is gone. Holding on to his heart means trusting that he sees what you cannot see. Imagine a tapestry being woven from the underside. From your perspective, it looks like a mess of tangled threads, colors that don't match, and patterns that make no sense. But from above, a beautiful design is forming. That's how life feels when you're in the middle of it. From your limited view, it may feel chaotic, confusing, and painful. But God sees the finished picture, and his heart is to create beauty from the threads of your life. You don't need to see the full design to trust the heart of the weaver. Sometimes the answers we seek are actually distractions. We think if we had clarity, we would feel security doesn't come from information. It comes from trust. You could know every step of the journey and still feel anxious if you didn't trust the one leading you. And you could know nothing about the journey and still feel at peace if you trusted his heart. That is the paradox of faith. It invites you to rest, not in what you know, but in who you know. When life makes sense, prayers can become routine, almost mechanical. But in times of confusion, prayers become raw, honest, and desperate. You are not worried about saying the right words. You are pouring out your heart. And it is in that vulnerability that intimacy with God deepens. You discover that he is not intimidated by your questions, nor is he offended by your honesty. He welcomes it and he meets you in it. That is how confusion, instead of pushing you away, can create some of the most authentic moments of connection with him. Think about a storm at sea. The winds howl, the waves crash, visibility is low, and everything feels uncertain. A sailor's instinct is not to drift farther from the anchor, but to cling to it more tightly. The same is true in spiritual storms. When confusion rages, your instinct should not be to drift from God, but to cling to him more tightly, because he is the only anchor that can hold in the chaos. The storm may not stop immediately, but his presence will keep you steady until it passes. Another reason confusion should draw you closer is because it humbles you. It reminds you that you are not God, that your wisdom is limited, that your perspective is small, that humility, rather than being a weakness, is actually a pathway to greater strength. God resists the proud but gives grace to the humble, and confusion often has a way of stripping away pride. It opens you up to receive grace in ways you might never have if life had always been clear. Finally, confusion can prepare your heart for revelation. Sometimes God allows seasons of mystery to position you for deeper understanding later. What feels unclear now may make perfect sense in hindsight, but if you let confusion push you away, you may miss the growth that comes in the waiting. By drawing closer to God in those times, you keep your heart open, your spirit teachable, and your faith alive, so that when understanding does come, you are ready to receive it fully. When you can't trace his hand, trust his heart, because there will always be times when God's work in your life is hidden from your eyes. You may pray for healing and not see it come. You may ask for direction and feel like heaven is silent. You may watch doors close without understanding why, and in those moments it can feel like God is distant. But his hand is never inactive, even when it seems invisible. He is always working, always guiding, always moving on your behalf. Just because you cannot trace the outline of what he is doing does not mean he has stopped caring for you. His heart for you is steady, strong, and full of love, and that is what you can lean on when the evidence seems thin. There is a difference between God's hand and his heart. His hand represents what he does, his actions, his timing, his miracles. His heart represents who he is, his love, his faithfulness, his character. We may not always understand his hand because his ways are higher than ours, and his plans are often beyond what we can comprehend. But his heart never changes. His heart is always good, always loving, always for us. If you anchor your faith only in his hand, you will find yourself discouraged when things don't unfold the way you expected. But if you anchor your faith in his heart, you can endure any season because his heart is unshakable. Think of the stories woven through Scripture. Joseph could not trace God's hand when he was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, and forgotten in prison. It made no sense in the moment. But years later, he saw how God had been working the entire time to position him for a greater purpose. Job could not trace God's hand when everything was taken from him, but in the end, he encountered God's presence more powerfully than ever before. The disciples could not trace God's hand as they watched Jesus suffer on the cross. But 3 days later, they realized his heart had been for their salvation all along. The pattern is clear. God's hand may be hidden for a time, but his heart is always for your good. In your own life, there will be seasons that feel like wandering in the dark. You will want to see signs, proofs, and clear directions, but the path will feel uncertain. It is in those seasons that faith becomes real. Trusting his heart means resting in his character when his actions are not obvious. It means believing he is guiding you even when the road is unclear. It means choosing to say, I don't know what you are doing, but I know who you are. That choice creates peace in the midst of confusion and stability in the midst of chaos. One of the most powerful truths about God's heart is that it cannot fail. Human hearts can be fickle. Love can fade, faithfulness can break, intentions can change, but God's heart is perfect. His love is unfailing, his faithfulness is eternal, his compassion is endless. He cannot deny his own character. That means no matter how confusing life becomes, you can always fall back on the certainty of his heart. When you cannot see his hand moving, remind yourself of who he is: merciful, kind, faithful, sovereign, loving, and true. Those qualities do not shift with your circumstances. They remain constant. This truth also frees you from fear. When you insist on tracing his hand, you can become consumed with worry, trying to interpret every detail of life as a sign. You can become frustrated, anxious, and even resentful when things don't match your expectations. But when you rest in his heart, you are freed from that burden. You don't have to figure everything out. You don't have to control every outcome. You simply have to trust the heart of the one who already knows the end from the beginning. His heart is enough to carry you even when his hand is hidden. Trusting his heart also transforms how you see waiting. Waiting can be one of the hardest parts of faith because it feels like inactivity. But waiting is often where God does his deepest work, shaping your character, building your endurance, and preparing you for what's ahead. When you trust his heart, waiting becomes less about frustration and more about expectation. You may not trace his hand in the moment, but you know his heart is at work behind the scenes. That gives you the strength to wait with hope instead of despair. Well, in the end, life is full of mysteries, and there will always be things you cannot explain. Some answers may come in time, and some may not come until eternity. But you are not called to trace every detail of his hand. You are called to trust his heart. That is where real peace is found, because his heart never fails. His heart never turns away. His heart never stops beating with love for you. So when you stand in the middle of uncertainty, choose to lean on his heart. When the path feels hidden, remember his heart is still guiding. When prayers seem unanswered, remember his heart still listens. When life feels confusing, remember his heart is steady. You may not always understand his hand, but you can always trust his heart. Wait, and in the end, that trust will lead you to discover that he was holding you, carrying you, and working for your good all along.